So, why is it that Japanese women seem to glide through menopause a totally different way than Western women? They have far fewer hot flashes, they have less brain fog and memory issues, they have less depression, and they don't suffer fractures from osteoporosis to the same extent because of these changes that they found in Japanese women. Was it genetics? That's what they thought at first, but they found it was more about what was on their plate and what was in their gut than anything else. So we're going to explore that today and let you know what you can do to mimic the same effects that have been found in Japanese women. So stay tuned. What is this Japanese menopause mystery? Well, studies show that Japanese women reported far fewer and milder hot flashes compared to their Western counterparts. And when they looked closer at their diet, they found a large difference in soy-based food, especially soy isoflavones. So this is not the same as the soy protein isolate that is in a lot of American protein drinks and protein bars. So beware not to use those. They do not do the same thing as the whole soy that supplies soy isoflavones. The Japanese diet has 20 to 60 milligrams of soy per day. Americans maybe get 3 milligrams, so a huge difference. When Japanese women migrate to the United States and start incorporating a Western diet, their hot flashes increase significantly. So they were able to determine through some of these studies that environment and diet were much more important than genetics in creating this difference. So let's take a look. What is soy isoflavone? So what are soy isoflavones? They are components of foods such as tofu, miso, natto, tempeh, edamame, and you probably have seen them in Japanese restaurants or in the grocery store, and maybe you've tried them. I think most Americans probably use tofu or miso more than the others. But they contain ingredients called soy isoflavones, and specifically genistein and diazein. And those are phytoestrogens that are plant-derived compounds that work on our estrogen receptors. And they tend to be selective about which receptors they work on. And these particular ones have a preferential binding to ones that affect the brain, the bones, and blood vessels, which is why they regulate and help regulate our heat and our hot flashes and night sweats, things like that. It improves their brain function, so memory and cognitive issues are less, and also depression, which is very prominent in menopause. It also affects the bones and the density of the bones. So they have less incidence of fractures and bone density issues because they eat these foods. Now, is it only these foods? We're going to talk about that in just a second, but there's actually a combination that has to be in place to get the full effect of it. In order for the soy isoflavones to have the major effect, they need to be transformed in the gut by a bacteria called S-equal, S-equal. And its metabolite makes it 100% more estrogenic on these receptors. So the key is that only 34 to 40% of Western women actually have those in their gut, while 50 to 70% of Japanese women do. So why is that? That's because these fermented soy products and high fiber, green tea, seaweed, things like that, that are more prominent in the Japanese diet, help to increase that specific biochemical in the gut microbiome. So that gives them an advantage. When they eat soy, it's magnified. The effect is magnified compared to Westerners that might eat tofu or eat some of these foods on an irregular basis, but they don't have this S-equal. Now, let's take a look at how we can improve that in our own diet. So eating the soy is one part of the equation, and that definitely does help, and we're going to go into more about the benefits for Westerners. But eating a high fiber plant-based diet actually increases the egg quality producing bacteria, the bacteria that magnify the effect, which is why Japanese women in Japan actually have a larger effect than we do when we start eating soy products. Also fermented soy products, which includes like the miso, that's an important one, and the natto. And antibiotics that we use extensively in our culture actually reduce the ability of us to produce that bacteria that then magnifies the effect of the soy. So it's not just about soy, it's also about our overall gut health. And we can improve it by increasing our fiber to 25 milligrams a day, eating more fermented foods, and reducing our antibiotic use. What kind of benefits are we talking about? How extensive are they? They found that in dozens of randomized controlled trials that soy isoflavones reduced hot flash frequency and severity by 20 to 30% versus a placebo. So that's pretty significant, and that would be worth it even if you don't have the right gut bacteria. The genistein-rich supplements produce the most consistent results. So if you're not eating those foods, you actually can take the soy isoflavones that have high genistein supplements. So that is greater than 19 milligrams per day of the genistein. The equal producers experience up to double the symptom improvement than ones who don't produce it. So, and you can increase your gut bacteria by the things that we just talked about, the fiber and the plant-based diet, etc. Okay, now bone health, in multiple trials, soy isoflavones slowed bone loss, particularly in the spine. And this is really critical, and it's one of the reasons why a lot of older people start to get shorter, because they start losing bone in their spine and they're not even aware of it, and they start having a lot of bone pain. So you can actually significantly reduce that with increasing your soy isoflavones. And the benefits are very strong in early postmenopause. So combining these soy isoflavones with calcium, vitamin D, and resistance exercise is another way that you can multiply the effectiveness of that. Now, what about the hot flashes is a result of changes in your blood vessels and vascular health. So the isoflavones actually do lower your bad cholesterol. It improves the function of the actual blood vessels themselves. So that's actually huge because that reduces your cardiovascular risk overall. So these are some really amazing benefits. I'm very excited to share this with you. So how much do you really need? So in whole food sources, you're talking about 1 to 2 servings a day. And for a lot of Americans, that might be a significant amount. So that includes your tofu, tempeh, soy milk, edamame, miso soup. Some of these are easy to integrate into your meal. You could just have miso soup before your dinner or for lunch. And soy milk, you can start using that in your coffee or in cereal or oatmeal, whatever you use milk for. And that can be a source right there. So having the 1 to 2 servings per day can give you the 40 to 50 milligrams a day of the total isoflavones, and that will give you a clinical benefit. So in supplement form, you can take 40 to 80 milligrams per day of the total isoflavones, and they should be standardized for the genistein content. And I explained that genistein is the one that's more significant, but both of them work together. So you want to allow, it's going to take 8 to 12 weeks, so 2 to 3 months to stabilize and get the most benefit out of this change. And definitely recommend non-GMO third-party tested products. Okay, and avoid soy protein isolate. Okay, that's important. All right, let's take a look at the bone density bonus. And because I'm a chiropractor, I definitely want to really promote the use of the soy for bone density because it's really important. And several meta-analyses have shown that an increase in lumbar spine markers and improvement in the bone density there. And what is the biggest cause of missed work and dysfunction in midlife as people age is back pain, right? And one of the reasons, especially in women, is this increase in bone loss. And that actually increases the osteoarthritis in your spine, as well as the bone density. Both of them can be affected by that. So that is a small protective effect, not as much as on the blood vessels and on the brain, but it is an important one, and it's definitely worth making some shifts in your diet to improve that bone density. All right. What is the safety aspect of it? Because a lot of women are concerned about breast cancer and estrogenic foods and things like that, but soy foods are safe. They have found in 20 different studies that breast cancer survivors were fine eating soy products. So don't be scared away from eating estrogenic foods if you've had any history of cancer. Actually, soy food intake is linked to lower breast cancer recurrence and mortality. So improvement in your lifespan and in reducing the chance of redeveloping breast cancer. Now, thyroid can be affected by soy foods. And if you're taking any thyroid medications, you want to separate out the time that like 3 to 4 hours to avoid absorption interference. So soy foods, and then several hours later, you can take your thyroid medication. And there are people, especially that aren't Japanese, that could have food allergies to soy. So that is something you need to watch out for. You might get symptoms of gastrointestinal, or you just might need to use less and build up to it. I wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk too about soy with mood and mental well-being, because it's so important to deal with our mental health. And I see so many women that suffer depression or on antidepressants at the same time they're looking for HRT or looking for answers for hormone issues. And the women in Japan who are eating the soy-rich foods have much lower rates of anxiety and depression during menopause than most Americans do. And that's because the S-equal interacts with those estrogen receptors that affect mood regulating brain areas, specifically in the hippocampus and amygdala, which are involved with emotions and dealing with our emotional tone generally. So these receptors really fine-tune serotonin and GABA, which have a naturally calming effect. And that is never a bad thing. And clinical trials show small but measurable improvements in mood, anxiety, irritability, especially among those that are the equal producers. And so you can improve that. We talked about how you can improve that with increasing the fiber in your diet. Okay, let's look at the bone strength, and menopause can accelerate bone loss. So I really want to explain that studies show that 1 to 3% gains in our spinal bone mineral density over a year when we eat more soy products. So the effect is stronger in early menopause. So the earlier you start this, the better. And combining it with the calcium, vitamin D, protein, and resistance training helps to magnify this effect. All right, so let's summarize what we've been talking about. The Japanese advantage is not just about fewer hot flashes, although that's an important part of it. It's about our whole body resilience, because it is affecting our blood vessels, our brain, giving us healthier hearts, sharper minds, stronger bones, calmer moods, and cooler nights. So those are really all important. You're going to benefit the most if you have a high fiber diet. You have to give it some time. If you're having mild to moderate hot flashes and you're post-menopause, then you definitely should start improving your diet. And like we said, 1 to 2 servings a day is all you need, or you can take the supplements and it will support your bone, your heart, alongside other symptom relief. Starting early in menopause is really important and very helpful, but you can start this at any time, but you get the biggest benefits when you start early post-menopause. Because you're changing your diet, we're talking about subtle changes that happen over time. You probably will notice a difference within a few weeks, but in 2 to 3 months, you'll start getting more maximum results and noticeable improvement. And not everyone is an equal producer of that gut bacteria. So you can improve that by taking fiber, but you know that Japanese that get the most benefit have been doing this for many years. So don't think that you're just going to completely change your gut very quickly. It takes time, but you will get benefits and you will notice a difference. So if you combine it with stress reduction, resistance exercise, and some aerobic exercise, magnesium, and adequate protein, you're going to see much better results. And I recommend that you get something like 90 grams of protein a day, 30 grams at each meal. And I do have a video on that if you want to know more about the midlife menopause diet. So what we have learned is that symptoms are not destiny. These are things that involve our whole lifestyle, nutrition, gut health, that profoundly shape our experience. And the Japanese advantage is not in genetics, but in their consistent daily habits that we can also develop over time. So if you've been struggling with hot flashes, bone loss, or depression, the key may not be in your medicine cabinet, but in your kitchen and in your gut, in your microbiome. And if you're interested in learning more, if you need more one-on-one help, or you just want to get more information, join our Conscious Aging School. We do offer free classes on hormone balancing and anti-aging, and we can learn the Japanese way of aging gracefully, naturally, and powerfully. All right. Namaste.